President Trump wasted no time setting his agenda into motion. Ahead on Face the State. In his first week, President Trump issued sweeping executive orders and directives on key issues, including immigration, diversity, and government efficiency. We're breaking down what some of the high-profile measures will do and who they will impact. Also, the day after the inauguration, Ohio's new Senator Jon Husted took the oath of office. Governor DeWine picked him to fill Vice President J.D. Vance's Senate seat. A Republican and Democratic strategist weigh in on Trump's first week in office and expectations for Husted as a senator. Plus,
I never went with any intention of causing any disruption or anything like that. Like I said, I got caught up in the energy of what was happening.
A Columbus man opens up about what he did during the January 6th insurrection that sent him to prison, being accountable for it, and receiving a pardon from President Trump. Face the State starts now. The first week of business is in the books as President Donald Trump kicked off his second administration with a blitz of policy actions to overhaul the U.S. government. His executive orders cover issues that range from immigration to government operation, healthcare, diversity, equity and inclusion, and the economy. Some have made an immediate policy impact, others are more symbolic, and some are already being challenged in federal lawsuits. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. President Trump's sweeping actions reflect many of his campaign promises while stretching the power of the presidency and moving the country sharply to the right. Here's a comprehensive look at Trump's directives so far through his first week back in the Oval Office.
First, immigration. So far, Trump is ordering the U.S. military to act as immigration and border enforcement officers. He's also redefining birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. A Trump order claims that a child born in the U.S. is not a citizen if, 1, the mother does not have legal immigration status or is in the country legally but only temporarily, and 2, the father is not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. This order is already being challenged in federal court. Trump has also ordered federal funding to be cut off for sanctuary cities. Columbus does not label itself as such, but Mayor Andrew Ginther did sign an executive order in 2017 stating city resources would not be used to enforce federal immigration policies. Massive government changes are also underway. The president established the Department of Government Efficiency until July 4th of next year. It's led by the world's richest man, Elon Musk, and is charged with recommending cuts in federal programs and spending. Trump also is making it easier to fire, demote, or reassign career senior executive service officials in the executive branch. Those are generally the highest-ranking civil service employees whose jobs historically have been protected through administration changes. Trump says since they, quote, wield significant government authority, they must serve at the pleasure of the president. He's also making it easier to fire federal workers. The executive order says federal employees and applicants must faithfully implement administration policies, and failure to do so is grounds for dismissal. When it comes to health care, Trump repealed Biden directives intended to make it easier to enroll in Medicaid services, secure insurance coverage under the Affordable Care Act, and lower prescription drug costs. This does not impact the Biden-era $35 monthly cap on insulin for those on Medicare, Medicare's $2,000 annual out-of-pocket cap on prescription drugs, or Medicare's ability to negotiate drug prices. That's because they were passed by Congress. The Trump administration also put a freeze on many federal health agency communications with the public through at least the end of the month. This includes an immediate pause on regulations, announcements, social media posts, and more. The president also withdrew the U.S. from the World Health Organization. And the administration is leading efforts to put an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trump is giving executive branch departments and agencies 60 days to eliminate DEI programs, including all chief diversity officer jobs, equity action plans, and environmental justice positions. It also terminates a 60-year-old executive order setting anti-discrimination requirements for government agencies and contractors. Another action effectively put all federal DEI officers on immediate leave pending their elimination. Trump is also requiring that the U.S. government recognizes only two genders, male and female, on documents including passports. Meanwhile, Trump has not done much during his first week to lower prices for consumers. In fact, nearly all of his moves surround tariffs, something economists say will only raise prices. So far, Trump says he plans to have 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods as of February 1st, but has not signed such executive action so far. He has begun a review of trade with China to consider new or increased tariffs. And Trump also directed the Treasury and Commerce secretaries to examine causes of U.S. trade deficits, identify unfair trade practices, and make recommendations, potentially including a global supplemental tariff.
Ohio's J.D. Vance made history himself on Monday, and people in his hometown of Middletown came together to watch it unfold. A small crowd of supporters gathered at Baraka Church in Middletown to witness their hometown boy make history. At 12:01 p.m. on Monday, J.D. Vance took the vice presidential oath of office with his hand on the Bible his great-grandmother gave him. Those we talked to at the watch party say they're proud of the achievements of their native son. The 40-year-old Vance is now the 50th vice president of the U.S. and the first VP from Ohio in about a century.
This is not about a political party. This is about the accomplishments of a man who really rose through very tough times to achieve some great things.
If you support Democrats, if you support Republicans, it doesn't matter. We've got a Middletonian in the White House. That's pretty cool.
The watch party was actually organized by parents of the Middletown High School marching band, color guard, and cheerleaders. The students got to perform for the president and vice president during the inaugural parade, which had to be moved indoors because of the weather. Also in the nation's capital, the day after the inauguration was a big day for one of Ohio's own. Ohio's new U.S. Senator Jon Husted was sworn into office. Governor Mike DeWine picked the former lieutenant governor to replace Vice President J.D. Vance in the Senate. DeWine says he offered the seat to Husted because he has the right skills for the job and believes Husted can win the special election for the office in 2 years. Here's what Husted said on the day the governor announced him as the new senator about his philosophy heading into office.
As a senator, I want to return power from the federal government to the states. States are closer to the problems and can innovate and better than the federal government, especially in education, workforce, and social programs, so we can help more people experience the dignity of work and strengthen the earning power of the middle class.
Governor DeWine will now have to nominate a new lieutenant governor. That nominee must then be confirmed by both the Ohio House and Senate. The governor's press secretary tells me the governor has no timetable for making his choice. Joining me now to discuss all of this from the first week of the new Trump administration are Democratic strategist Morgan Harper and Republican strategist Matt Dole. Thank you both for being here.
Sure.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
First of all, Matt, we'll start with you. What's your big takeaway from week one of Trump 2.0?
Well, there's been a breadth of policy tackled during the first week, but I think it's the process, how fast it's happening. His nominees are getting movement in the U.S. Senate. He's having these signing parties with all of these folders on the desk where he's signing executive orders. And I think it's just how fast he's getting into work this second term.
How about for you, Morgan? Big takeaway?
I think there's a couple. I mean, we do have to acknowledge that there are policy movements that are happening, that there's the possibility, if they're real, that we could have bipartisan support for, like making the government more efficient. I think a lot of folks would like to see the government save money. But in the background of all of this is that this is an administration that Trump has made very clear is going to be heavily influenced by the largest tech companies on the planet that also have the most money on the planet, and that should concern all of us, in addition to his restriction of power in other parts of government.
One of Trump's most controversial immigration orders seeks to deny birthright citizenship to the children of immigrants who are here in the U.S. illegally or on temporary visas. A judge already halted that. Matt, do you believe for the administration that's the right way to go? What's your take on denying birthright citizenship?
First of all, there's an argument about whether it's constitutional, and I think Trump is inviting the judicial review. By signing this executive order, I think he is inviting the judicial review and letting the Supreme Court decide, does the first half of that sentence in that amendment, is that what counts, or is what's after the comma in that sentence that no one really wants to talk about, does that count? And that would allow the government to restrict some citizenship. And so I think he's forcing the court to make a decision. That's why it was done by executive order.
Morgan, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, this certainly is a move for him to placate his base. This is one of the things, immigration, and that you have people who are in this country that are getting the resources necessary to lead successful lives. That was a major plank of his campaign. And so the fact that he moved on that quickly, I think makes a lot of sense for him politically. I agree with Matt that it is going to force a conversation about our immigration policy in the U.S., but also the Constitution is the Constitution, and we would expect that our president would uphold that. So this will be interesting. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think we also need to acknowledge that a lot of the issues that people have with our immigration policy are also connected to the larger promise that Trump made, which was he was going to improve people's economic lives. And whether or not he can do that, reducing the cost of living, bringing down inflation, very much remains to be seen.
He also pardoned more than 1,500 January 6th defendants, insurrection defendants, and some Republicans, including Lisa Murkowski, have criticized or at least expressed surprise that it was a blanket pardon for the folks who were charged or convicted in January 6th. Morgan, what message do you think that sends with his blanket pardon of these folks?
I think he's emboldening people and his most ardent supporters to do pretty much whatever they want if they think that they're going to be protected by the MAGA movement, would be my take on that.
Matt?
I think what surprises me is that people continue to be surprised when Trump follows through on what he says. He said he was going to pardon these folks, especially after Joe Biden followed through on the pardons that Joe Biden followed through on. And then we're all aghast that he does a blanket pardon. He promised to do this. He said he was going to do it. He did it. And by the way, he has the right to do it.
I don't think, go ahead, Martin.
Well, but even if it's following through on a promise, not all promises are worthy of making. And this is one that really gets at what do we stand for as a country? Are we going to allow people, enable them and say it's okay if you threaten the lives of sitting members of Congress, law enforcement officers, if you are desecrating sacred buildings that are part of a Capitol that your people from your own party were part of? So, I completely agree. Again, politically, makes a lot of sense. But for us as a country, what does it mean for us moving forward? Troubling.
It sounded like the big concern, too, was not for some of the people maybe who didn't do anything violent, but the most violent offenders that people were surprised by.
I think the problem is that the lawfare attacked everybody, right? And so Trump's actions, pardons, it's a blanket pardon, but the overwhelming majority of folks, of those 1,500, weren't violent, attacking police, everything else. And the problem started when Biden prosecutors went after those folks.
Okay. Morgan, I'll start with you on this one. The president effectively ended all diversity, equity, and inclusion, as I explained in the setup here a couple of minutes ago. What impact do you think that will have as he puts all the people on leave and is ending those programs on the federal level?
I think it's going to have an immediate impact. I mean, an executive order doesn't immediately influence how different agencies are managed. In theory, they do. But for example, Joe Biden ordered the Federal Reserve to immediately review bank merger guidelines. Well, that never happened in the Federal Reserve. They just decided not to do that. So it's not a guarantee. But I do think, especially in this case, in the political environment around DEI issues, a lot of heads of agencies are going to take that seriously. It'll trickle throughout different parts of the economy beyond the government, that you're going to see companies that are also going to be increasingly nervous about having DEI programs. And that's a concern because ultimately, we do what a lot of DEI programs are getting at are making sure that everyone has a place in the workplace, including disabled, including women. But I think there's also, again, this is the tricky thing with a lot of Trump issues. There is a kernel of a core issue that we do need to talk about, which is, a lot of black people did support Donald Trump, some for sure, and are looking to make sure that we're getting ahead. And if DEI programs weren't effectively doing that, then that's a real conversation that we need to have. But Trump's not getting into the nuance. He's doing blanket statements, as we've been talking about, and this ultimately overall is going to have a real chilling effect on folks feeling that they can have those inclusive programs.
Do you agree with that or disagree?
No, I think I generally agree with that. I think I have a more cynical look at the whether it will be successful or not. There was a graphic that came out from the ATF where Ohio and Steve Dettelbeck was the director, and their DEI chief reported directly to him. A new organizational chart was released after he left. He was removed from that organizational chart, Steve Dettelbeck was, and the DEI chief became a senior advisor. And so I think that there's some cynicism on the left, on the right, about whether this will actually happen and get done and what the president will have to do to see his
meaning that there's some of those people in the positions will just be shifted or
given a new
retitled?
title. Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So Obviously, a very busy first week. What are you expecting in like week 2? And a lot of times people look at that first 100 days.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of the same. I think we are going to have to see the sort of cycling of the legal reviews of a lot of these things. I mean, everybody has talked mostly about the birthright executive order, but Congress passed a law saying TikTok needed to shut down by X date. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court said that's true, TikTok needs to shut down by this date, and Donald Trump signed an executive order saying no, TikTok doesn't have to shut down. That is in direct conflict with the Congress of the United States, and the Supreme Court. So those sorts of things need to play out, and then of course he'll get more and more of his nominees through the U.S. Senate, and we'll start to see those departments come into action.
What are you thinking for the next?
Well, excited to agree with Matt again. I mean, I do think we need to continue to pay very close attention to how much President Trump is flouting the balance of powers in our United States government. He is disregarding the Supreme Court. We now are also seeing members of Congress who are supporting him. We have a bill that was introduced to try to allow him to have another term, to change the Constitution, to extend him into a third term potentially. These are very concerning moves for democracy overall. But I do hope that we are going to continue to have a conversation that President Trump has engaged in already on trade. That's going to be a very hot topic in addition to TikTok. And I hope that we will see some movement on this DOGE effort. The ability to make government more efficient is something that I think a lot of Americans support, but we need to be honest about the fact that the main driver of spending in our government is defense, and that is a lot of defense contractors that are gouging us as taxpayers, and that Republicans would focus on that as a top priority.
We just have a little bit of time left, and I did want to touch on our new senator. Senator Bernie Moreno is obviously new, but even newer than he is Senator Jon Husted, just sworn in this past week. Matt, what kind of senator do you think he'll make? Yeah,
it was a pretty cool moment. It was the 4th time in U.S. history where a vice president has sworn in his own successor. It was sort of a unique moment in history. I think Jon Husted is going to work in the U.S. Senate with Bernie Moreno to see through Donald Trump's agenda. I think that's the kind of senator he's going to be. People question whether he's a true conservative or not. I think Jon Husted, going back to when he was Speaker of the House and Secretary of State, is a strong conservative. He served Mike DeWine well as lieutenant governor, but he's gonna be the sort of senator you expect a Republican senator to be.
Morgan, what do you expect?
Well, I think that's a great question. What does it mean to be a Republican senator in 2025? There are 2 factions within the Republican Party that are at odds with each other. One that is very much on the side of protecting big business. Husted has represented that faction along with Mike DeWine for his entire career, and we have a MAGA movement that has moved the party in a different direction. And that's where a lot of members in Congress are also battling over these lines. I think it's going to be very tricky political terrain for Jon Husted if he expects to hold on to that seat moving forward.
Got to run for it again in 2 years. There's a special election coming up. Matt Dole, thank you so much. Morgan Harper, appreciate your perspective on this. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you so much. A Columbus man sentenced for his actions on January 6th and now pardoned and freed from prison just days into his prison sentence. Ahead, what he's now saying about his actions that day and about receiving the pardon as he talks only to 10 TV. Welcome back to Face the State. In one of his first acts back in office, President Trump pardoned about 1,500 January 6th defendants. Dozens of Ohioans are among them. I talked to a Columbus man just hours after he got out of prison. Kyle Campbell pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault on a police officer for his role on January 6th of 2021. He just started serving his 4-month sentence on January 9th. 11 days later, President Trump pardoned him, and before he knew it, he was a free man again.
Kyle Campbell was just reunited with his 4-year-old daughter Tuesday morning. He wanted her with him for our interview. Campbell says only about 30 minutes after President Trump signed the pardons, corrections officers at the federal prison in Michigan came to get him from his unit.
They were walking fast, and I hear a guy just yell, "Campbell!" And he comes down, he comes to me, he says, "Grab your stuff, anything you need."
2 hours later, he was free. 3 years ago, he says he found himself caught up in the mob at the U.S. Capitol.
What did you do on January 6th?
I went just with the intention of just going to see it. You know, I've been a Trump supporter since 2016, and it just seemed like it was going to be a good time. I had questions about the 2020 election.
Campbell admits he was wrong in going on to the U.S. Capitol grounds. He says video shown in court shows he was pushed from behind into a police officer twice, and that led to the assault on an officer charge against him.
So I get pushed back into the police officer. I've got my hands up now, more of a defensive thing. I'm in a mob of people and a police line right in front of me. And that's what landed me in prison for 11 days.
Did you ever go inside the building?
I did not.
Why not?
I don't know. It just didn't seem like a good idea. I never went with any intention of causing any disruption or anything like that. Like I said, I got caught up in the energy of what was happening.
Any regrets?
I regret that I was in a mob, for sure. I regret that I let my own free will be swayed by a group. I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't damage any property.
Campbell feels fortunate he was sentenced to only 4 months in prison and that he served only 11 days of that.
What do you think about President Trump's pardon?
I think it's a wonderful thing that he did. I think he made a promise to people. People were there for him.
And calls this all a character-building experience.
I do know I was in the wrong. I do know I broke the law. And I think taking accountability for your actions is important.
What's your message to your daughter?
Take accountability, be strong, and be yourself.
Campbell tells me he feels that he was treated fairly by the FBI, the judge in his case, and the corrections officers while he was in prison. He sells insurance and says that he has a job waiting for him. Now to the State House, where Republican lawmakers introduced a bill that would make big changes to higher education in Ohio. Sponsors say Senate Bill 1, known as the Advance Ohio Higher Education Act, will guarantee and enhance free speech and diversity of thought on campus. It would also ban all diversity, equity, and inclusion courses and training and prohibit faculty from striking. Bill sponsor, State Senator Jerry Serino, says the bill would also prohibit universities and professors from taking positions on controversial subjects.
It doesn't mean they can't be discussed in a classroom. They certainly should, but they need to be balanced and not indoctrinating in nature.
Opponents protested in the hallway outside the room where the news conference was held. They argue the legislators are attacking higher education by shutting down, not opening up intellectual diversity. They also call the bill government overreach. Coming up next on Face the State, celebrating the national champion Buckeyes. There's one more chance to do that, and it starts in just minutes. Monday was the inauguration for the new president. It was also a coronation of the new national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. The Buckeyes beat Notre Dame in the first ever 12-team college football playoff championship game 34-23. They capped off a dominant run through 4 of the best teams in the country. The Bucs then came home to be greeted by very happy fans at the Woody. And now there's one more chance to celebrate this historic team. In just 2 minutes, the Buckeyes are hosting a celebration at Ohio Stadium, the Shoe. You can watch the noon ceremony right here on 10 TV. Just don't change the channel. Hear from head coach Ryan Day, athletic director Ross Bjork, Governor Mike DeWine, and a list of OSU football players. Our own Dom Taberry will be live from the Shoe and bring you all the excitement right here on 10 TV, as well as 10 TV Plus, and you can listen on 97.1 The Fan. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30.